Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about Muslims reaching the Americas before Christopher Columbus did. On social media, this entire series actually received more than 4 million views. So what I'm going to tell you in this series, in this podcast, is actually how did I get to this topic? I'm going to tell you about a timeline of Muslims who reached the Americas. So like all these type of like explorers from not just like Arabs, it's like from South Europe, like Cordoba, Spain, the Ottoman Empire, Chinese Muslims, and even I'll tell you something about like not Muslims, but ancient Egypt, because I think it's so interesting. And honestly, what I'm gonna tell you is so juicy. And then I'll also go through the books, which there's like all these professors and experts I've mentioned, right, in that first video that I posted. We're going to start off with Al-Masudi, and he is a historian. And basically, he was a descendant of one of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And so I think that, first of all, was really cool. And he was born and educated in Baghdad. He wrote about history. And like one of the most interesting stories that he talked about was about this Muslim explorer. His name was Kash ibn Said ibn Aswad. And he was from Cordoba. And what's cool about this story is that, he sailed from Cordoba and then he crossed the Atlantic to a place that was called the Unknown Land. And it was called also like I think it was called in his book something like the large area in the ocean of darkness, because it was unknown territory. And Kash ibn Said ibn Aswad, he actually came back with lots of treasures. And I think this is really cool to know because it shows that they were going there. They knew there were lots of treasures. And, yet all of these different groups of Muslims went there without genociding the entire population. So first of all, I think that's really interesting. What's also very interesting is Al-Masudi. He wrote about another very interesting story from Ibn Fadlan. I hope I say it right. But he was basically I think he was like a diplomat, like an ambassador. He was seen as a very, prominent person. And he had contact with the Vikings, and the Vikings in Sweden specifically. The civilization amongst the Vikings was not necessarily very high at that time, but there is actually proof that some of them converted to Islam. I think that's amazing. The second one is there's a Muslim historian. His name was Abu Bakr Ibn Umar al-Qutiya. And I feel like people do talk about him a lot. He basically talks about someone called Ibn Farouk, okay? And Ibn Farouk was also a Muslim navigator, and he sailed also into the he got to two islands which were called Capraria and Pluitana. I think I looked it up which ones those were now in the Caribbean. I think I forgot though. But he went back to Spain, and so this was in the year, let's say, 999. Kash ibn Said ibn Aswad went there. It was, I think, 889. So I'm trying to do it in a chronological order. And then we have Ibn Farouk, and he went there in 999, so 1 century later. Then we have Al-Idrisi, and he's like the world's most, he was a pioneer when it came to cartography. And you should know that if you ever look at a world map, immediately you should think about Al-Idrisi, okay? He was the first one to make a realistic world map. And it wasn't just a world map, like a world map that looked like really not realistic. It looked like what we know now. And I was just checking it this morning again. Until this day, we cannot get the size of Africa right in our world maps. Well, Al-Idrisi, he knew how to do it, but this is again one of those things, where I just mentioned information is distorted to oppress people. And so Al-Idrisi, he didn't do that. He didn't do that. And that's something that I will point out in other sources as well. The Muslims were very, honest in the way that they also transmitted this information. And I will get to this a little bit more, the reason why. Okay, Al-Idrisi, we're going back to him first. Okay, so he actually made this world map in, it was an assignment that he did for King Roger Bacon. Bacon or Beacon? Bacon. And basically, he was the king of Sicily. And it was also proven that the maps by Al-Idrisi, that Columbus used them. Who was it proven by? Well, I'll give you a Western source. Why not? So it was the former director of the Center of Archaeological Research in Middletown, New York. His name is Salvatore Michael Trento. I try to reach out to him. Like, I try to reach out to everybody. Could be that he's not alive, but I do remember looking him up. It's just not easy to get in touch with people. Maybe they're also like, whatever, it's been proven. There's nothing more to say about it. But like, to us, you're watching this, is very interesting. Okay, so that is the story of Al-Idrisi. He wrote this book. He did it for the King of Sicily, and he made the most realistic, real maps of the world. The first person to do it, it was Al-Idrisi. And it's so funny because this morning I was going back to the map, right? And I was comparing it to the maps in Europe that were made compared to Al-Idrisi. Like, the difference is like a child made a map versus an expert. It's incredible. I think you should Google it yourself and you'll see it. But like, it's not easy. But anyways, I do have the images, but what to do, huh? Follow me on social media and I'll post it, one of these days, because it is very important to see. Okay. Then we have Abu Bakr II. And okay, honestly, I love this story. I want to do an entire podcast about him. That's why I don't want to talk too much about it. But I'll just mention it quickly. The Mali Empire from West Africa, everybody knows that was the wealthiest kingdom to have ever existed in the world. Okay? And we need to know that. We need to know about them. We need to know about this story. Because these were people, obviously, with like a level of influence at that time that we cannot comprehend. They had values of going overseas, traveling, exploring, gifting people things, spreading knowledge, spreading their wealth. And I mean, the world doesn't talk enough about that. We need to talk about that. Okay. So anyways, I do need to do a whole podcast about it anyways, but don't have so much time. Okay. Why do you need to trust these sources? Now we get to the point I really wanted to tell you about. Okay, I didn't know it was already here. I thought it was like way back, way later. Okay, anyways, I'm going to tell you something really interesting. This is maybe one of my, not my favorite fact, but like up there. Okay, so basically, I was reaching the whole thing about Vikings converting to Islam. The story I just mentioned a little bit, Ibn Fatlan, which was written about by Al-Masudi. And what I found there is that the historians who researched Vikings they actually said, you need to go back to the Arabic sources and not trust the European sources, because the European sources are intentionally talking badly about Vikings. And it turned out, according to these experts, they said the Arabic and the Muslim people who talked about the Vikings, they didn't lie. They did try to be as objective as possible. And so that's number one. That's reason number one why these sources are important for us to consult. Look, I'm going to make one little disclaimer. I don't speak Arabic, so like I really don't have a choice, but most of you do. And so you should be going back to all of these sources. We should also really trust these sources, because like people are even saying to you now, like people who are not Muslim, they're saying, okay, you need to trust these sources. But okay, we need to also trust these sources. And so basically what we see is that history, even this entire story, history is used as a tool of oppression, okay? They don't want to talk about Muslims reaching the Americas first because it would prove that Muslims were advanced 1,000 years, 1,000, maybe not 1,000, okay, 800 years, 700 years before Christopher Columbus went there. It would prove that. The second thing it would prove is that Muslims went there and they didn't murder everyone. And so that's how history is being used as a tool of oppression. I get so tired because I just get too excited over this. Okay, anyways, that's one thing. Then, okay, I just also want to talk about another thing that's really interesting. Look, if you look at the way that Muslims have been referencing information for 1,000 years, not 1,000 years, again, why do I say that? 800 years before, is it 800 years? Yeah, 800 years before in the West they started referencing things. That should tell you the level of refinement and civilization, and if you look at the Hadith system of sourcing and referencing things, if someone was seen as a non-trustworthy person because they were caught in a lie once, like their accounts of our religion were not taken seriously anymore. Like those people were being seen then as someone you cannot really, they have weak accounts of what they've heard or seen. And so in the West, they only started doing this in the year 1577. So 1577, which is 800 years after we started doing it, or at least 700 years. So like this whole idea of referencing things to find out if it's true or not, it is an Islamic principle. And so, but okay, obviously we need to be careful to see who is behind even the sources in the Muslim world. But a lot of these people like Al-Masudi and Al-Idrisi, they have written books, and those books have been preserved. I think someone told me that the book, I think by Al-Idrisi or Al-Masudi, is actually in the museum in Qatar, which I think is so amazing. And then here in UAE, I know that in the Mohammed bin Rashid library, there's also loads of things from all these people. Like I remember I went there and it was like Avicenna is there. I think Al-Masudi, things of his are there. Al-Haytham from like optics, the father of optics. Some of his books and stuff are there. So like, we really need to go out there and explore because it's amazing. Okay, now we're gonna get to something amazing. Oh no, we have 9 minutes left. Basically, I have to go to the airport after this. Like my luggage is over there, but I'm just recording this right now for you because that's how much I care about this story. Okay, so we have 9 minutes. And there is something I really want to talk about because it's so cool. Okay, it's about the ancient Egyptians. Okay, the ancient Egyptians. In my video, one of the videos, I talked about how several people went there. One of them were the ancient Egyptians. Okay, obviously, this is not Muslim glory, but Egypt is a Muslim country nowadays. And so I do want to include it because I think it's so interesting. Basically, I presented some ideas. I think at the time I mentioned how at the time of the pharaohs, or like even the pharaohs themselves, were buried with ships that were strong enough to make the trip to the Americas. Okay, the reason why I mention this specifically is because this Eurocentric type of history likes to talk about, countries in North Africa, the Middle East, as if they didn't have the knowledge to go to the Americas. Like only Europeans had the knowledge, according to them. Okay, anyways, these ships that were found, they were made of papyrus. And there was actually a researcher he was in the past, like, I don't know, even a few decades ago. He actually did this research where he recreated the ships that were found with the pharaohs, and they were made of papyrus. Papyrus, I don't know if you say it like that, papyrus, like, I don't know. Anyways, you know what I mean, I hope. And those ships, they were able to cross the Atlantic. That's what they found. So they were like, everybody who's trying to debunk it saying like, oh no, the Egyptians could have never gone there because they didn't have the ships. They didn't have like the knowledge to create any ships to go there. It's not true, okay? They could. Okay, anyways, what's really funny about this story though? Okay, listen, when I posted this clip, a lot of people responded. To my video, and they started saying to me, they found cocaine on the mummies. Multiple people started saying they found cocaine on the mummies. I was like, why are people trolling with me? That's so weird. Like, why would you say such a weird thing? And I just ignored it. I didn't even respond to these people because I was like, so annoying. But then at some point, I actually thought, let me just look into it. Like, let me just look into maybe they're seeing something that I just don't know, or maybe it means something else. Yo, they literally found cocaine on ancient Egyptians who were mummies. And so we have their bodies intact, and they found cocaine on them because apparently they were doing cocaine. I cannot. This is such a crazy story. Anyways, this is the University of California who has found this out, okay? For those of you who are looking for Western sources. But anyways, I don't think anyone has ever spoken about this. They were doing cocaine, okay? Look, the thing is, this has been found like a while ago, but then initially people were trying to say it's not true. Maybe they were like me. I don't know. It just sounded weird, okay? And so they were saying, but they were saying weird things as well. Because they were saying when your body decomposes, it naturally makes some type of chemical that, tests for the same as cocaine, which is weird. That's not true. Come on. Then they started saying in the process of mummification, a chemical like cocaine starts to, appear. That's also weird because the cocaine is not a chemical kind of like thingy. It's a leaf from South America. And so, you have to understand if the mummies were found with cocaine, that would have proven that they actually reached the Americas. They found it was true, y'all. Look, another thing is like they started saying, no, the researchers might have had cocaine on them and it spilled on the mummies. It's not true. They found it's true. There's cocaine on the mummies. I sound crazy when I say it. Even when I hear myself, I'm like, you sound crazy. But anyways, this is the thing. It's been proven by University of California. Okay, I'm not making this up. But also, we're already at the point we know, people went there. Thor Heyerdahl, so he is the one who did the research on the ships. He already proved that the pharaohs had the ships, first of all, that were strong enough to go there. And so, it's not at all like they didn't have the innovation, they didn't have the materials, they had it all. Basically, they were going there to get cocaine. That's crazy. Okay, anyways, I mean, I have, this is something I cannot change it. Okay, I cannot change this. Let me give you a few other things. Like, I feel like this really is the highlight of this whole podcast because it doesn't get crazy. Everything that comes now is like a buzzkill compared to this information. I should have put it at the end. Okay, let me see. How long do I have left? 4 minutes. Okay, anyways. Okay, so one thing I think is really cool. Someone on Instagram, I think he has like 9 kids. He told me that he talks about my content with his kids to teach them. And he asked me to mention a specific thing because, okay, basically, I don't know if you know this, but I didn't say this in my series on social media. There's more than 500 places in the Americas named after Muslim places and cities and words, okay? And some of them are Mecca, some of them are Medina. Okay, so like that's very obvious, but there's also some that are a little bit less obvious. But one that he thought was really cool is Tallahassee. Tallahassee, I think it is. Ooh, I forgot to write down the translation. Ooh, okay, anyways, I need to talk about it in the next episode because basically some of them really are obvious, like Mecca, Medina, but some of them are a little bit difficult. Like for me, at least, as a non-Arabic speaker, I don't really hear it myself, to be honest. Like I cannot. I do know like one of the other ones because I wrote it down. That's how I know. Is one of the other cities is Muhammad, but it's like written very different. And this is like all over America, but also Canada, by the way. Yeah. Someone said to me, like multiple people have said it. Okay. And this is, I couldn't verify it, but they said California was named after the caliphate. I was like, I love it, but I cannot find the research. Okay, so that's a bit unfortunate. It is now the end of the podcast, almost the first part. So there's going to be 2 parts because I'm going to talk about the topic of Muslims reaching the Americas in 2 podcasts. I just want to thank you for watching this and I hope you enjoyed it. You're always free to give me feedback about like things you want to hear and things that or things that you think are interesting to look at. Make sure to subscribe, please, because basically I am just like very new with YouTube, and do share it with your friends and whoever you think is interested in this. Make sure to sign up for the e-learning course if you also want to become a public speaker like me who works internationally. I'm on my way to Poland, but just stopping to do this session with you.